Well, welcome everybody, and first of all, thank you so much for coming to the first of this webinar series on contextual Bible study brought by St. Ambrose University and the Center and Library for Bible and Social Justice. Very quickly, my name is Matthew Coomber, and I'm an Episcopal priest and an assistant professor of biblical studies at St. Ambrose University. St. Ambrose is a Catholic university which has been very kind to host this in the diocese tradition. And the Catholic intellectual tradition, and has a history steeped in social justice work, so I was very pleased to land here. I'm also on the board of directors for the Center and Library for the Bible and Social Justice, which was started by Norman Gottwald, Herman Waitchen, and Jack Elliott to bring biblical scholarship and grassroots activists together. And it's through them and St. Ambrose that we're doing this webinar series, which is doing exactly what we hope to accomplish. I think that's about it for me. I'm going to pass on to Brad, who's going to give us a little bit of the nitty-gritty of the technical details of this webinar.
Okay. First off, I'm glad you were all able to join and get in with no problems. No one's called me yet, so that's promising on my end. I guess Paulo's going to give you a good talk, and then I think they're opening it up to discussions and questions, and most of you have already figured out that you're able to type in the chat box, and I think when that point in time comes for the questions and answers, you're able to go ahead and ask your questions in the chat box, and then Matthew and Crystal will kind of pick and choose some of the questions for Paulo to be able to answer, and they'll let Paulo know in a private chat which ones to discuss about at that point in time. So go ahead and put your questions down in there, and with that said, here is Crystal.
Great. Thank you, Brandon. So in the tradition of contextual Bible study, typically we would have a go-around of introductions where each person would introduce where they're coming from, what brings them to the space, their names, their organizations. With the limits and of this particular webinar technology, we won't be able to do a go-around for this session. We hope to figure out how to do that for future sessions. So I'll just say briefly, in welcoming everyone to the space, that we're being joined by participants from all over the United States and all over the world, it looks like, from Canada, from Davenport, where St. Ambrose is, from the Northeast in Jersey City and just outside of New York City. Also, looks like Columbus, Ohio, a couple locations in Canada, Greenville, South Carolina. So we're very excited that you're all joining us from such a diverse set of locations, and you're all very welcome, and we're very excited that you're participating, and encourage you to be raising your questions in an ongoing way in the chat function. So now I'm going to introduce Paulo, who is our speaker for today. So Dr. Paulo Ueti is a theologian and New Testament Bible scholar from Brazil. He's joining us from Brazil today. He is the Latin American and Caribbean regional facilitator of the Anglican Alliance. He is a member of the Ecumenical Center for Biblical Studies, CBI. He is a Brazilian Association for Biblical Research member and a collaborator with the Landless Peoples Movement, the MST, and Via Campesina International. And he's also been involved in several projects on contextual Bible study in Latin America, as well as in Africa and Europe. And so we're very grateful to be learning from him today. So take it away.
Yeah, hello, good morning well, for me it's good morning as well for everybody, and it's a really pleasure to be here and to share what we've been doing, and to get not only by myself, but together with lots of people in Latin America, United States, Central America, Europe, and Africa. We are here to go through a conversation about contextual Bible studies, and of course, it's going to be from our perspective, in a sense. It's not going to be the very conversation, but it's going to be the start of a conversation on that. You will have the opportunity to meet other of my colleagues in the next sessions, and I will hope that we can draw a very good map on what we've been doing, and we can learn from each other in this path. I am also here advisor or a theologian member of the Episcopal Church here in Brazil, which is now we are doing lots of contextual Bible studies and some helping the church to get more involved with the SDGs and with the sexuality conversation. So just one addition to my bio. So I would like to move forward quoting two passages, one from very famous from our point of view Roman Catholic bishop called Elder Camara. Once he said in one of his conversations with the people that alongside the development of action for justice and peace, it will one day be necessary to collect from all sacred books of all the religions the exhortations, precepts, and prayers which speak about peace and justice. He wrote this in his book Spire of Violence from 1971. It was very ancient. And of course, as a Bible scholar, I could not help myself to quote the Bible, of course. Not trying to be fundamentalist, because this is some sort of for me and for some of us, it collects the spirit of what contextual Bible studies are doing. It's from the Romans, chapter 12, and the 2nd verse. It's the introduction to the community shape that he's sharing, the Apostle Paul. And the quote is, I'm very sure that you are very familiar with that, but don't be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind so you can figure out what God's will is, what is good and pleasing and nature to God. These two passages or quotations are, for me, collect the spirit of what we've been doing in the past 40 years or more, maybe, in contextual Bible studies. And I might say that pretty more. I really can say having the risk to be to do some anachronism. It's just the Bible itself has been doing what we today call contextual Bible studies. Rather than share some very theoretical proposals or thinkings, I would like to go through the conversations on contextual Bible studies through reading for us a very basic story, and of course you are very familiar with it. Then we can go through this story, and we can discuss part of it in terms of what we do as a contextual Bible study. And the passages from the community of Luke, the chapter 24, from verse 13 to 35. It's a very known story that is only in the Gospel of Luke, so it must be some sort of a problem or issue that community was passing through, and probably the authors had to raise this story or put together some memories to help the community to find the path again to the cross. So the story is about some people running out from the community, losing religion, losing connection, losing hope, and actually running away from the path that they were before. It's a story about a couple. So one person we know that his name is Cleophas or Clopas. The other disciple we really do not know. We can put ourselves in the place of the disciple, of course, but also we can do some digging into other texts to do some intertextuality, and to figure out that Clopas or Cleophas, he was married. His wife is called Mary. It is quoted in the Gospel of John. So maybe we can assume or we can presume that both of them are actually running away from the community and going to Emmaus. from Jerusalem to Emmaus. And probably we could say that it was a couple, a heteronormative couple, a man and a wife, traveling together. Of course, it's probably because I was not there. I cannot testify by myself, but it can be anyway. And it's good to think that it's possible to be. So the story is very well organized. So who wrote the story did a very good job in terms of splitting the scenes in a very methodological way. I can say that we can find that three particular pericopes or blocks. So the first one is about when Jesus approached and talks about context, their own context, the disciples' context and Jesus' context as well, and probably the communities of Luke's context. The second part is about burning the memory, so bringing up the memory, bringing up history, bringing up some aspects of history, actually, not all of the history, doing some sort of very intentional interpretation, being biased, actually, I can say. And the third part is about making community and being strength to get back to the main community in Jerusalem. So this is how we actually shape what we call contextual Bible studies. In this context, Bible, and community context again. So I think there is a slide, I think, in your screen. So we tried to picture. Of course, it's just a picture. It's not. It doesn't say all, but we try to picture what we are trying to say through this story and many others. So there is a relationship, an intertwined relationship, and a very structural relationship between the community of faith, or maybe any other community, the society. I'm sorry, I'm just put only Latin America because I couldn't put the word, but it's the word our society. And of course the biblical text, the Bible, the sacred text. So let's go through the story and we will tackle some of the theoretical or theological assumptions that we want to raise here and to put for discussion. So the community starts the story by stating a very common and a very traditional theology. That means God always takes the initiative. God is the one who approached initially. So this is what happened in the story. So Jesus himself decided to approach the disciples after a comment from the author. So then the story is saying that Jesus actually approached the disciples. So in the same day, two disciples were traveling to a village, and they are talking to each other. When they were discussing, Jesus himself arrived and joined them. So here there are two main methodological things, and two very theological statements, very strong. So approaching. So one of the things about contextual Bible studies is the approachness process. How do we approach? And first of all, we have to approach, not waiting that somebody come to us, but we actually go and look for and we approach the community, the context, the reality, the conversation. And another step is we join. It's not only about listening from behind. It's not only about trying to pick up some parts of conversations or to be part of some gossiping process. No, we want to be part of it. So this is very much important when we do contextual Bible studies, is how do we gather people, how do we approach, and what's the desire, what's the willing that we do have as ordinary readers and as facilitator to join the group. Not only be there, but actually join the conversation and join the group. Another step, which is very important in the process of contextual Bible studies, is as you join the group, how you do that. So here, maybe some aesthetics, vocabulary, posture play a very important role in that. How do we gather people and what is our behavior? Who we are when we are with the group and in the community. Are we part of the community? We want to be part of the community, or we are just some sort of, passing through, or some curious person, or as some of us scholars trying to teach someone else what we do or what we know about the Bible. And another thing about that is how do we listen to the people actually? How do we try to make silence and try to understand, first of all, what they are doing and saying, where they are? What is the conversation we have to raise to understand the context, not only being there. And maybe, of course, we are part of this. And how do we understand properly the main context? Just a minute. I have to just 3 seconds. I'm sorry about that. So, when we gather people and we are in the community, so we are trying to capture and we are trying to blend in and we are trying to offer our collaboration in that community. What Jesus did in this process, it's really important in the contextual Bible studies, is asking right questions. So then Jesus entered into the conversation, trying to listen. It's not written, but we can maybe figure out that he was trying to listen what is going on. And then he asked the first questions. What are you talking about? What's the subject? What happened with you? Some people can say that why Jesus is asking them something that he already know, or something that maybe if we go to the historical Jesus question, of course he knows what happened because it happened with him himself. Or maybe some people are saying, no, he was just pretending to do that. He was pretending in order to start conversation. In terms of a methodological approach, so why Jesus asked it what he maybe already knew? One of the very important things to raise here that we do not know everything, and it's important to raise the questions about our own context sometimes, and to raise questions to the other people, because we don't know what they know about the context, or we don't know which are their perceptions on what is going on. This is why it's very important to, after worship, after gathering, doing some introductions, maybe the first questions is, what is going on in your lives? What is going on in your community? What is going on in your country or in your particular work? What is happening? And another important thing is, for the person who asks, be quiet and actually listen and provide the space to people to share what is going on. So listening here and being capable to create safe space for conversations is very important in the contextual Bible studies. And probably Jesus, of course, got quiet. He shut up to listen to the answer, and the disciples then answered that. So are you the only one who doesn't know? Outside or foreign, you don't know what happened? It's some sort of the disciples are quite disappointed. Why you don't know? What's happening? And Jesus insisted in the question, of course. He did not answer, actually. He insisted, trying to provoke and to enable some safe space for the disciples to share more, to do some sort of, which is very common in every religion, to create a space for therapy, for healing, start healing, that starts by telling what is going on. and revisiting some very traumatic past or traumatic events by verbalizing, by saying what is going on. It's a very good process of starting healing. And I think that in the context of Bible studies is also about that, how this healing process, or how much of this healing process we can offer, or we can enable the community to experiment. And here it's an interesting thing about, then we can move to the theological choices and perspectives. If we can go through the answer of the disciples, so they were very sad, they were very disappointed, maybe helpless. They thought they had an image of Jesus, and it didn't fulfill. It was not what Jesus actually was. I believe that if we can go through the two main theological underpinnings of this conversation, so the disciples are reading, and the disciples had their faith from the first conversation of the book of Isaiah, which was portraying the Messiah as a king, as a political, economical liberator, as someone who is going to overthrow the Caesar and put in the place. So if you can see me, so actually the disciples, this is the system. The disciples did not want to change the system. Their hope was to actually do this, not change. So the disciples were here on the bottom. What the disciples were expecting actually just to upside down, to be on the top. So actually the main conversation on the first book of Isaiah, trying to portray the Messiah as a king, as a real king, a just one, a good one, brotherhood one, etc., whatever. But king is king, kingdom is king, monarchy is monarchy. But this was the expectation of the disciple. And of course, it was not fulfilled. Jesus got murdered. Jesus was assassinated. And what they were expecting didn't happen. So the disappointment, the hopeless was devastating. So they were actually running out. They mistrusted the community now. Probably they felt betrayed about the whole promises of everything is going to be well, the kingdom of God, the fraternity, the abundance, and etc. And then at this point, Jesus actually jumped into the conversation a little bit, maybe we can say upset. He was a little bit nervous and upset about that perspective. The first part of this Jesus is speaking, Jesus was trying to shake them up. Are you nuts? You've got some, weak mind. Don't you remember some of the things? Don't you read? Where are your tradition? Or from which tradition you are drinking, actually, having your strength? And the other part of the Jesus speech was very interesting. Then it seems that Jesus took the whole Bible. He started to read the Torah, so that the first books of Moses, and the prophets, and the writings. But here it's an interesting point. And we, here in Brazil, we are trying to tackle this very carefully, but here is the point that actually the text says that Jesus was picking up some passages from Torah, from Nebi'im, and from Ketuvim, for what is being said about him. Jesus was not reading the whole Bible or quoting everything about the Messiah. No, we believe that he was quoting some passages, because actually he said, he picked up the passages that was talking about him. It was a very theological choice he made here. We believe so, and Jesus himself was very very keen to portray himself as the suffering servant, which is the second book of Isaiah, not the first book of Isaiah. And probably here we've got a very theological conflict here. So the disciples, actually, they were in a certain stream of theology, which is just drawing from Isaiah 1:39. Jesus himself, and maybe the community of Luke, and many other communities actually, they are actually having their faith from the figure of the suffering servant. So there are two theologies, and Jesus picked up one theology to follow, one image to portray himself, and one perspective to move forward. Probably, and I say probably again, I was not there, I cannot testify properly, but probably, maybe this is the reason that disciples were not recognizing Jesus as Jesus. Because in their mind, Jesus was not that person who was walking with them. Jesus could not be the persons who got murdered. Jesus could not be the poor one, the companion. Because in their minds, Jesus was the king, was the future David again. This is very interesting now in our process of methodological approach on contextual Bible studies. And the question here, when we do Bible studies, is which kind of theology we are developing, and to whom we are developing this theology, and to what purpose we are developing the theology. Here in this methodological piece of Luke, it seems that the the theological choices that Jesus has made and community of Luke had made was to uplifting the community, to get the community with hope again. And here it's very interesting maybe for all of us or some of us who love Bible scholarship. We are Bible scholars, Bible professors, Bible lovers, and etc. But here it's very interesting. So the disciples, they were not recognizing Jesus before, during their first walking, talking about context. After reading the Bible together, or maybe reading some parts of the Bible together, also, they were not recognizing Jesus. They were just, in the end of the passage, we can say that just their hearts were burning. So, talking about context, reviewing, reassessing context, sharing trauma, sharing activities, or sharing what we do, and sharing the Bible, reading the Bible together, studying the Bible, it don't allow us actually to recognize, to open the eyes, and to move us back to the community. It did not give us courage enough, actually. They still were going through Emmaus. When they got to the cities, and on the last part of the text and the conversation, when they arrived to the city of Emmaus, so they were invited. Jesus was invited to enter, to have community, to make community with them, to have a meal. And this is very interesting here. I made maybe three aspects we can highlight, we can underline in terms of methodology, in terms of political actions. So hospitality is very important to transform lives. Sharing food, sharing meal together, sharing resources, actually material resources, money, meals, housing, and etc. It's very important. And praying together, so for people of faith, so creating, building faith communities around these values, around hospitality, around walking together, around sharing, around being to each other, not leave anyone behind. So build community of faith is quite important. Then only after that, actually, after all of this, all elements, so then after the blessing, after the sharing the bread, sharing the meal, the table, the house, so then the disciples actually could bear the testimony. So we recognize Jesus now. So he was Jesus. Then this is the Messiah. It's not maybe that one we were thinking about. And then they recognized Jesus. So their eyes open, and they got courage to get back to Jerusalem, to get back to the path of cross, to get back to the dangerous path they are going to face. Only after that. So all of these elements are very important to help communities and help people to move from, in the beginning of the story, desperation, hopeless, fear, sadness, running out of the community, losing their religion, into the end of the story. So they are now at the end of the story with courage. They are seeing clearly what they have to do. They are moving back to the community, not running out from that. They have their hearts burning. So there are these, in the first centuries we call this mystic, this burning feeling that moves you. So they got again passion. They got the opportunity to fall in love again. And I'm sure that all of you felt in love once in your life, and you do know what happens when we fall in love. So crazy things happen, stupid things we do. We do some dangerous things, and we want to be together. We don't want to run away. Usually is this how it happens. And I think this is some of the purposes and the process of doing the contextual Bible studies. So in the next minutes, I will just now to summarize. I'm not going to speak 45 minutes. I think it's too much. Then we can have a place for questions or comments. I would like to hear some comments of you, actually. So doing some sort of a summary, do some points. What contextual Bible studies means, and what's the nature of the contextual Bible studies. So first, so contextual Bible study is really a participatory process. So these two words are very good, very important to have in mind. Participation and process. It is very, very, very important to have it into all the process, in all our conversation. Other things, so all the contextual Bible studies is an intentional work. We don't do Bible studies, contextual Bible studies just to know the Bible or to be more knowledgeable and more good in data or facts or whatever. We read the Bible because we want to transform life. We want the world to be transformed. We want justice and peace in place. So we want ethics in place. So this is why we do read the Bible intentionally, targeting this purpose. It's important to say that because I can read the Bible to slave people. I can read the Bible to do sexism. I can read the Bible to be intolerant with other religions. I can read the Bible to justify genocide, as it was done before. So I can read the Bible to be an oppressor. I can read that. So it is there. This is why, so contextual Bible studies have an intention. So we do intentionally. So we read the Bible because we want to change context. We want to change ourselves. So it's an ongoing, it's a everlasting work of raising awareness. And also, it's a working that must be done together. So participation here is not only some sort of, raise your hand and ask questions or share your knowledge and etc. No. So all the work must be done together. And it drives us into a very difficult conversation, which is about power relationships in community and among ourselves. How we manage to have power relationships more balanced. How I myself as a Bible scholar, how can I not use my position or my knowledge to oppress people? Or how can I be aware that my knowledge is one knowledge and there are hundreds of other knowledges which I don't know. So I'm not better or worse. I just have one expertise to share. So what is your expertise to share? This is why it's working together is very important. And now 10 points I think we should, I raised here so we can have for later discussions. And I am sure that my other colleagues in the next sessions will tackle this in a very good way as well. So one is, of course, participation. This is number one. So everything, all the process must have the participatory element in that, including worship. So I think it's important to say that in the contextual Bible studies, worship, liturgy is a very important key part of it, because it doesn't, it's very quite schizophrenic if we do. So I am Anglican, I'm Episcopal Anglican, and so we Anglicans, we do love lots of priesthood things. We love, fancy papers. We love sheets with you can repeat words, and someone in the altar and we in the back. So not good. So this is not what must happen in the contextual Bible studies. How we organize the room in a circle as far as it's possible. How I pray in order that everybody can participate. It's not something that one person leads and the other one is just an audience. This is quite difficult actually to organize worship when we do contextual Bible studies. How we use symbols, how we use silence in that. So participation, worship is a very important part of it. Second one is reciprocity. It is important to acknowledge that we are sharing. We are not giving or receiving only. It's a sharing process. There is a process of reciprocity. And all the elements in the process are very important. So if you take some passages, for instance, the bleeding woman who touched Jesus and she was healed. How she could be healed? So Jesus said, your faith saved you. And some preaching says, no, the power of Jesus saved her. So in the contextual Bible studies, we have to say that all the process were part of the healing of this woman. So moving out of her disease, going through the crowd, touching Jesus, staying for conversation, accepting being part of the community. So everybody was part of this. This is reciprocity. So the woman was healed, but Jesus lost something as well. Some part of him were lost. So some energy came out from him. The three thing is very important as well is dialogue. So contextual Bible study is a dialogical process. Everything we do, including the architecture of the place we do contextual Bible studies, is to provide, to enable spaces of dialogue. The fourth thing is how we can provide understanding and burning hearts of the people for dignity and full life. So how we can help community and how we can organize the community to be more human and to be more connected to the earth. The fifth point is about emancipation. So all we do, the methodology, the content, the texts we use, the process we establish to do, is to provide emancipation of people. I think you remember that at the end of the story of the couple of Emmaus, Jesus disappeared. So how can we provide the space that in one time, me as facilitator, we can disappear so people can go to themselves, for themselves. So how can we emancipate people, try not to have them on dependency, on any kind of dependency, which is quite different to being religion. So how, of course, our communities to be connected, but how to have people more autonomous in their own way. The sixth point is about transformation. It gets back to I think maybe half of the Bible is talking about that, and the passage I took from the Romans, how we work to transform. This is the horizon of the contextual Bible studies. It's transformation. It's not only, it's not only to be more aware or more knowledgeable. The seventh point, so maybe for some contexts it's a little bit hard, but the seventh point is to be creative. So to enable and to enhance creativity in the community. How can I help people and how can I myself improvise in order to keep the horizon, the objective in front of me? So creativity is very important. To use the resources that you have in the community to help to understand that the people and community, they do have the resources. So then we can use it as instruments of transformation as well. They are not without light. In Latin, there is a word called alumnis. I don't think it's in English. We call in English students. But in Portuguese, we have two words. We have students and we have alunos for the students. That alunos or alumis means someone with no light. So can I get rid of it? So in my process of a relationship and helping communities to relate to the sacred text, so they do have light, they do have knowledge, they do have what to offer. And how can we be creative in the community to understand that, have them understand them? The eighth point is capacity to be critical. So, of course, not to be every time annoying, but how can I help people, and the Bible studies can help people to be critical to the system, to the text itself, to the way that we relate. So how can we help people to be very critical, including be critical when we read the Bible? How can we be suspicious about what we are reading? Of course, every people do not have access to the Greeks or the Hebrews in our between comma originals. But how can we have people to be suspicious about some translations, about some pieces of the Bible that it might be complex and difficult? How can I help people to be curious? In Portuguese, we have a saying that this is to actually keep people, to domesticate people. So be careful because curiosity killed the cat. So how can I overcome this? How can so the Bible studies is actually to kill this saying. So no, be curious, ask questions, be in doubt. This is very important. And the ninth thing, actually, it's about solidarity, which in theological terms is building community. So all the Bible studies is actually one of the main purposes to do biblical and Bible studies is build communities. Communities of reconciliation, communities of transformation, communities of resilience, communities of solidarity. And this is very much part of our main spirituality. I think I spoke 40 minutes. I think that's fine. And I will, so actually the coordination of the seminary, the seminary will share with you a paper that I wrote about this. It's more in detail, so you can actually react later on from the paper. So then I leave you, Crystal, so you can organize the questions or comments or whatever. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Paulo, for such a rich and engaging presentation. There have already been a couple of questions that have come up as you've been speaking. And I would encourage participants, as they're continuing to process what they've just heard, to raise their questions in the chat function, and Matthew and I will give voice to those questions. So the first question that came up during the presentation was from Nathan. And Nathan asks, as facilitators and scholars, why is it appropriate to place ourselves in the position of Jesus in relationship to the community? I think the spirit in which this question is being raised, and Nathan, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that Jesus in the Road to Emmaus story is the person who's asking questions. So that's Nathan's question. As facilitators and scholars, why is it appropriate to place ourselves in the position of Jesus in relationship to the community? And then we also have a question from Jennifer Henry. Jennifer asks, what considerations do we need to give to power differentials between participants in the Bible study? She raises that some might have privilege or power that relates directly to the oppression of others we, the group, or others are trying to emancipate. And it's rare and problematic to be in a completely monolithic group. Obviously, most contextual Bible study groups are heterogeneous. So the question being raised here is how to negotiate power differentials within a contextual Bible study process.
Okay, so Nathan, about your question, you are asking if why it is appropriate to place ourselves in the position of Jesus in relation to the community. From our perspective, we found quite enlightening this passage from the community of Luke, because actually Jesus is placing himself as a facilitator of getting people from maybe from desperation or hopeless and etc. into courage, enlightening, and moving forward in that. So we, as scholars or facilitators, which maybe, for instance, in my biblical center here, it's more than 50% of the facilitators, they are not scholars. They are very regular, ordinary people who pass through trainings, actually, to become facilitators of the projects. That means they do have a little bit more knowledge, more technique than the ordinary readers. And we find this passage of Jesus as a very interesting mirror for our behavior and in the way that we should relate to the community, so by being facilitators. Maybe sometimes, and of course here in Brazil we experience a lot, so lots of scholars, they are not facilitators actually, they are part of the community, lots of them. I myself, so when I started participating in the groups of the CEBI, of the Ecumenical Center for Biblical Studies, I was not a facilitator myself, I was just participating. So the person who are facilitating the process helped us, scholars, to understand our position in relation to the community. So the question here for us in terms of shaping the group is what every one of us can contribute to the Bible study. So me as a scholar, I can contribute with some sort of knowledge. Some other people can contribute with some other perspective. And then we can build the hermeneutical process together. It's just, it's not that we must facilitate everything. No, sometimes we just go and participate and give our input. In my parish now, for instance, I am not the one who coordinates or facilitates the group. I am just a very regular member, and when the facilitator provokes or enables space to share or to build something, I just give my inputs or my perception. Ecclesiastical and theologically speaking, I do believe that the chapter 24 of Luke, as well as the other last chapters of the Gospels, which is, some people say that probably from the 2nd century, they were written and they were placed there to do some sort of a beacon, to do some sort of a light to follow, actually to do what we are calling here methodological way, methodology. They are placed there to help the community to get back to the hodus, to the path that maybe they are going out, going in another direction, which I think we know that most of the communities are actually going very far from the original, between comma, original way of Jesus' movement. And this chapter 24 of Luke, because we are talking about Luke, is to do like that. This is why when we write and we speak and we do contextual Bible studies, so this passage, Jesus is very much some sort of a model. So we try to do and we try to follow what he does in this story, actually. And I don't know, actually, to be very frank, I don't know if it is appropriated or not. So this is what we've been doing in the past 40 years, and it is working in most of times. For the Jennifer Henry question. So first, Jennifer, thank you for that. And yes, you are very right. Usually there is no monolithic group. There is no. I don't say usually. I'm sorry. In my context, it's quite different. So in my context, sometimes you do have some not monolithic, but you do have a more homogeneous group when we do contextual Bible studies in the poor communities, in the vulnerable communities. It's very rare in some vulnerable communities to have the mayor or the entrepreneur or the landlord participating in the Bible studies. So it's quite difficult. But we do have some sort of a heterogeneous group as well. And contextual Bible studies is not a social class struggle only. Of course, the social class plays an important role in terms of assessment and in terms of approach, but it's not about that. It's about actually if I'm being so pietist, I'm sorry, it is about to be in the line of Jesus' call and in the line of our commitment as Christians to transform and be transformed. So everybody should work to transform, and in this process everybody is transformed. And in the same way, in the same time we are transformed, we are working for transformation. And everybody must go into that from my perspective. This is why our theology is very intentional. So when we do theology about that, we do intentionally to help people to understand that solidarity, community, not taking count of social class issues is very important. I and some of my colleagues, we do have the experience to do Bible studies with very rich people, with very scholarly people, with very established people, together with some poor people, with people with no privileges. And of course it is a challenge. Of course it's a very challenge in our society, marked by inequality and marked by the huge gap between rich and poor. But through the Bible, I think, and through this notion of build community, build reconciliation, build the process of transformation, I do believe it is quite possible actually to be together and to go forward together. I'm not sure if I answered your question, but it's just some thoughts from our context, and I think you should raise these questions to my other colleagues as well. I think it's going to be interesting. There is more questions, no, Crystal?
Yes, thanks, Paulo. So there were two comments from Glenn Leach to raise, and if there are any other final comments that are questions that folks would like to make, I'd invite you to do it in the next couple of minutes, so that we can have those collated at the end for Paulo. So if there are any other questions that come up, I would encourage you to put them in the chat function in the next minute or two. So two comments from Glenn Leach. The first is that I think referring to the previous question, I interpreted Paulo to say we should emulate the approach Jesus used because of the way he approached the community. That was the first comment. And then the second comment from Glenn, I was struck by Paulo's point that participants in the Bible study must essentially agree that the purpose of the study is personal spiritual transformation, not to learn to quote or acquire knowledge, not to impress or sway others to one's own positions. I suspect that some time spent on that with prayer at the beginning of the session will help when participants come from different positions of power or social positions. And so then there's another comment from Jose Luis. Thanks, Paulo, for your great lecture. In my understanding, contextual Bible studies pay attention to the context of people and then read the Bible and use it as a tool of liberation. My question would be how contextual Bible studies honor the context or meaning of the Bible. So maybe that'll be our final set of questions, and we can continue to raise them in the chat function as they come up.
Okay, so I will. So thank you for all of your comments. So as I said before, it's one perspective, and of course every perspective has a context. So this is why it's very good you keep participating in the series, because you will be in touch with the different contexts with other of my colleagues. So Jose, about your question on how contextual studies honor the context and meaning of the Bible. So first of all, of course, this is a very tricky question and a very tricky concept. What do we mean by meaning of the Bible and the context of the Bible? Because analysis of context is about context. Depends where we are, which text I have, which agenda I propose, I will do different assessments. So, for instance, of course, of course here now, the shape of the Bible is very, very important in the contextual Bible studies. This is why we don't want to make the Bible a book of liberation. So maybe not. So the Bible is the Bible. So the text is the text. And I used to say, I'm sure you are all seeing me. So I use my students something that I ask them to put the Bible in the ear, and I ask them to wait a little bit, and that's something not happening. Someone, of course, get mad, and I ask them, are you hearing something by putting the Bible in your ear? And of course not, because the Bible doesn't, between commas, say anything. We say, so people say, context say things about the Bible. So here interpretation, and I must say the policy of interpretation, plays a very important role in this shape of the Bible, because the way that the Bible is formed is, of course, it's quite important to understand the meaning and to understand some of the messages we can grab from the Bible. But the messages or the meaning that we can grab, of course, depends on our context, depends on our agenda, actually. So I can be sexist by reading 30% of the Bible, and I can do theology from that. And maybe it is quite legitimate to do that. Or I can read the canon process. So how the canon process plays a role in the process of interpretation and in process of liberation and emancipation. So why the Gospel of Matthew is the first book in our New Testament canon? Or why we keep saying that the Hebrews is a letter of Paul to Hebrews, because everybody knows it's not a letter, it's not from Paul, it's not to Hebrews. Why we've got at least 6 different pictures of Jesus in the New Testament. So we've got the 4 Gospels, we've got Paul, we've got Apocalypse and Revelation. It's quite different. So how the canon ended up calling God in Greek the same title that the emperor has, and in the New Testament as well. So Pantocrator and the Kyrios, how we ended up that? So how from a very simple, humble figure that we know that Jesus was, we ended up in some churches doing the feast on the last Sunday of November of the Pantocrator Christ. So the king with crown in a throne, ruling everything. So it's I think your question is important, and it's up to us actually, who has maybe more knowledge or more privilege in terms of biblical studies, to help the community to understand the context, the shape, and the way that the Bible is organized, written, redacted, re-redacted, put together, translated. So here, translation is a very important piece. So of course, for all of you who has exegetical skills, I am very mad when I take a Bible. So some of the things are at least outraging the translations. So then it's up to us to help people to understand that, to do what you're saying, Jose, to honor the context and to honor maybe the meaning of the Bible. There are lots of other questions. Can I ask that to Crystal?
Sure. So there are lots of questions that continue to come in, which is great. So I'll raise a final set of 4 questions for you, Paulo, and then if there are additional questions that come up, we can post them. We can post them as a collection of questions for later conversation. So I would encourage you that if there are additional questions that come up, for the sake of time, we might not be able to address them all here, but we definitely want to continue to collect and collate those questions for future conversation, both in this webinar and in an ongoing way. So the final questions that I have, one is about liturgy from Shanda. Shanda asks, can you talk a little bit about how you use worship and liturgy for relationship building in CBS? It seems like a huge part of the study relies on established safe and sacred space. So there's a question about liturgy. And then we have a question from Nathan. I'd like to hear more about the sharing of resources. Can you share more about how that is done in some of the poor communities you work with in Brazil? So a question about resource sharing from Nathan. A question from Matt. He says, thank you. How does the community choose a text for study? What is the role of the facilitator in this? So text choice. And then Susan's question, are you assuming that the community doing the Bible study already know each other a bit? If not, how much community building do you do before you jump into the study itself? So those will be the final 4 questions we'll raise for Paulo in this session. And then again, I would encourage you, if there are additional questions that come up, please list them in the chat function and we can post them for future conversation.
Are you listening? I'm sorry. I was in mute. Sorry. I was starting from the bottom. So if I'm assuming the community already know each other, no, I'm not assuming. So if they know each other, it's better. But anyway, it's important to build community. It's important to build relationship, as well as if people do not know each other. So it is very important to develop techniques and to develop some maybe games or do some play to help people to interact, to break the ice, to do some confidence exercises. So if people, the important here is to learn, the facilitator has to learn techniques to create a safe space, to create a space that people can say or be silent and not be bothered by that. So this is quite important of that. So some techniques is quite important. And then to help this, then I will jump into the conversation about worship and liturgy. So worship and liturgy, they are very important to help to create this spiritual and sacred space where we are. So we are not, when we do contextual Bible studies, so they are not, for instance, if I am the facilitator, they are not my students and I am not in the university. So they are my brothers and sisters in faith. I am maybe in a community hall or in a church or in a house. So I do this in my house, for instance. So we are brothers and sisters. As far as it's possible, we try to balance relations. And liturgy and worship, singing, or doing symbols, they help a lot to do that. So it's not wasting time on Bible studies to spend 15 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, depending on the time you have, or maybe half an hour, to do some worship and to take this opportunity to create the safe space and also create the sense of community. Do some techniques of saying names. I will share sometimes what I do. I usually do, I use some sort of ball. Let me show you. Usually I use this little ball. Actually, it's from Guatemala. It travels a lot with me. So then I do some games with her to present, to share something, and sometimes I use, it's good to be home. Sometimes I use a candle, which is quite interesting, because if you have a candle lightness, for instance, passing through the people, you can create opportunity for everybody to speak or not, but anyway, you will give the opportunity to everybody participate in some way, to say something, or to do a prayer, or to raise a name, or to answer the questions maybe you are asking. So with the balls, it's interesting because it's a good technique if you don't want everybody to talk. So you just throw the ball to some people, and some people will ask. Then you ask the ball again for you. So it's maybe a good technique to learn. But this is why worship and this first part of presenting, introducing itself, it's quite important to the contextual Bible studies, and as well as to end up the Bible study in a prayer. It's very, very, very important. And for us, it's really working a lot. About what Nathan, about the sharing resources, what I meant is, so first, this kind of sharing resources is about who has the power. This is the question. Who has the power? Who has the main resources to go forward? I was studying with lots of people in these days because my church is talking about resources, sharing resources. We are talking about the widow of Sarepta, that passage from Elijah, and the widow of Sarepta. Usually this passage is preaching in my context as, so you have to pay attention to the man of God. You have to obey what the man of God says. When you obey what the man of God says, you will have abundance. So what would happen with the widow and her son? In a city with lots of small entrepreneurs doing with meat, with flour. And then we are trying to turn it off. So actually, in this conversation about Elijah and the woman, how it comes that we do have abundant food and abundant life after all. So again, I get back to the process thing. So all the elements in the conversation there is important. But anyway, who has the resources to share? And she was not confident that she had the resources. Maybe it was not sufficient. It was not enough. But she had the resource. And when the man of God facilitated or pushed her to share the resources, many things happened. So one theoretical and theological things on that is to recognize and to acknowledge that the community has resources. So starting a Bible study, actually trying to ask people, what do you know about this? What do you know about the context? And maybe what do you know about this passage, about this particular text we are studying, or maybe particular book? Sometimes you are studying a book. What is your knowledge? What you heard about? What's the preaching? So this is starting to help people understand, so they do have resources to share. They are not empty vessels. And other things, of course, they have material resources to share. They have symbols, they have Bibles maybe, they have food. So another particular thing in the Bible studies, as we here in Brazil, all biblical studies is done with food. We like to eat. So we ask people to bring things for the table. And at the end of the Bible studies, we have some sort of tea, coffee thing. So this is a movement to nurturing community and acknowledging them that they do have things to share. It's quite important. And also it has to do with some sort of a gesture. When we ask people to hold hands, it may be stupid, but for us it's very important. When we ask people to raise hands, we always ask people to do it in this way. The right hand with the palm down, and the left hand with the palm up. We do this for the people. Please do that. We do that. We ask people, and turn your thumb to whatever side you want, and do this. And then we will have, some sort of a matching. And then we start a conversation. So everybody can share. It's not so poor, so you can share. And everybody is not so rich that cannot receive, so you have to receive. For us, this is some sort of sharing resources from the community. And I think the last one is about the choose of the text. So who asked this? So about the choosing text, it really depends. For instance, if you, as a facilitator, or maybe as a church, you've got an agenda, so you can choose the text to the community. It's up to you as a facilitator. Or if the church has something already done, you capture it from the church or from the community what they do have. Or, and then here it requires the facilitator more knowledge and more capacity to improvise, which sometimes is not easy. We can do some previous work with the community to choose the text from the community. I was leading a dialogue conversation in Africa with 6 Lutheran churches in 2 years past. And in the last year, they were 21 people. So in the last year, we asked them to bring to the meeting, it was 10 days meeting, to bring to the meeting 21 texts. So everybody, please bring 1 text. So you want to talk. So then in the first day, we had 21 texts. Then we split the groups in 5. Then you have to choose one of these texts. They choose 5 texts. And then you have to split, and then we have 5 texts to study. So then but the problem is, for me, it was really hard because I had no idea which texts I'm going to facilitate. So I was confident that they will help me in the process as well. So they were sharing resources. And this is the way that we chose those texts to study. So it depends, actually, the agenda, the community, the church, and etc. I hope I answered all of your queries and questions, and I'm very available if you want to email me and or contact me through Facebook or Skype, whatever. We can discuss further if you want to. And then Crystal, Matthew, they do have my contact, so it's easy to find me. And I am a half a Japanese person, so I'm very connected. And I'm sorry, my English, as you know, English is not my first language, and sometimes I just, jump into my own words. So I hope it was understandable. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Paulo. This is just excellent, fascinating, and I know I learned a lot. And no, not at all. Your English is excellent and certainly far better than my Portuguese, which is non-existent. So thank you so much, Paulo. And thank you also to all of you. Really appreciate your interest in taking time on your Saturday mornings, if it is morning where you're at, and joining us for this. In closing, I'll be sending out an email in the next week or so, and it will include Paulo's materials so that you all have access to that. It'll also include the question and answer text so that you have access to that as well. And I also wanted to mention that Crystal and I, when creating this webinar series, had the idea to possibly do a follow-up in a year to year and a half from now to see where everyone's at, a chance to get back together and discuss the things that we learned in this webinar and in the 2 other series as well, and to see if anyone is implementing contextual Bible studies. We really want to keep the conversation going, so you'll be hearing from me on that front. And just trying to think of anything else. There's a number of thank yous to Paulo coming in here, which is great to see. Again, really appreciate your being a part of this. This is the second in a series of Bible Justice conferences that St. Ambrose and Center Library Bible Justice with St. Ambrose have put on, and excited to try the online format and really enjoy today's. So thank you again, and all of you know how to get a hold of Crystal and myself if you have any further questions. All right, take care, everybody. Goodbye.